Hello, welcome to Life Group. Good to be with you again. I love you. I'm thankful to be pastor in your life. We are continuing in the subject, Get an Attitude, the Attitudes of Christ Community Church. We are on the fifth of six. And the fifth one is this: bearing one another's burden and fulfilling Christ's mandate. Bearing one another's burden, fulfilling Christ's mandate. I'm loaded with Bibles here and text references, and we're going to start reading. So if you can go to Galatians chapter 6, verse 1 and 2, I'm going to read those two verses in the King James Version, and then we're going to look at an NIV, and then ultimately the Amplified Bible. Out of the King James Version, Galatians 6, 1 and 2 reads like this: Brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault, ye which are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness, considering thyself, lest thou also be tempted. Bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. Fulfilling Christ's mandate is fulfilling the law of Christ. That puts a little weight on it right there. It's the law of Christ that we bear one another's burdens. Question was asked last week or a couple of weeks ago, am I my brother's keeper? Quick answer, yes. We are to bear one another's burdens. The NIV reads like this: Galatians 6, verse 1, I'm going to read down through verse 5. Brothers, if someone is caught in a sin, you who are spiritual should restore him gently. So if we qualify ourselves as being spiritual, there's our mandate. We should restore him gently. We talked about speaking the truth, yes, but in love. And we're not really interested in you speaking the truth, not interested in me speaking the truth, if we're not committed to follow through loving them. And I'm pretty sure of this: if we're upfront committed to loving someone and being gentle with them, then when we speak the truth, it will be in love. If we're committed to that follow through, it will play out in love. If someone is caught in a sin, you who are spiritual should restore him gently. But watch yourself, or you also may be tempted. That's interesting. It's kind of put right in the middle there. We may be tempted, but it doesn't exactly say how. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Here's the temptation. If anyone thinks he is something, verse 3, when he is nothing, he deceives himself. If you think you're something, when you're nothing, and ready for the news flash, you're nothing. Without me, ye can do nothing, Jesus Christ said. It's in him that we live and move and have our being. It's in him. He loves us like we're everything, but the reality is we're nothing. So if anyone thinks he is something, when he is nothing, he deceives himself. Each one should test his own actions. Then he can take pride in himself without comparing himself to somebody else. For each one should carry his own load. So the temptation here, watch yourself, or you also may be tempted, is going to come even a little more clear to us, I think, reading out of the Amplified Bible. Again, Galatians 6:1, Amplified. Brethren, if any person is overtaken in misconduct or sin of any sort, misconduct or sin of any sort, listen to this, you who are spiritual, who are responsive to and controlled by the Spirit, should set him right and restore and reinstate him without any sense of superiority and with all gentleness, keeping an attentive eye on yourself, lest you should be tempted also. The Amplified even opens it up for us a little bit more, that we're supposed to guard against any sense of superiority because it is innate, it's in the water. When you correct someone, it's very easy for us to condescend. It's very easy for us to feel like we're in a different place because that's not our particular struggle. Well, here's how I call it. I call it the drug of choice. It may be working too much. It may be pornography. It may be lying. It may be busyness. It may be Harlequin novels. It may be academics and pursuing PhDs. It could be anything. It's your drug of choice. We all have those things. And to recognize that there's nothing superior in me. If I'm spiritual and led by the Spirit, which is what it says here, who are responsive to and controlled by the Spirit, if I can see that, then I need to go and point that out. But recognizing that I am a, what's the word we use, a fellow traveler, Verse 2, bear, endure, carry one another's burdens and troublesome moral faults. And in this way fulfill and observe perfectly the law of Christ, the Messiah, and complete what is lacking in your obedience to it. For if any person thinks himself to be somebody, too important to condescend to shoulder another's load, too important to condescend to shoulder another's load, when he is nobody of superiority except in his own estimation. Does that clarify it? No one of superiority except in his own estimation. He deceives and deludes, and this actually says, and he cheats himself. But let every person, verse 4, carefully scrutinize and examine and test his own conduct and his own work. He can then have the personal satisfaction and joy of doing something commendable in itself alone, without resorting to boastful comparison with his neighbor. Now I want to point something out in verse 5. For every person will have to bear, be equal to understanding, and calmly receive his own little load of oppressive faults. In verse 2 it says, bear one another's burden. And in verse 5 it says, every man should carry his own burden. Don't you love that? Oftentimes we think the Bible is contradictory, but this one is right in the same chapter. Paul must have been having a, what we call it, a senior moment, I don't know. Forgetful, an Andy moment. But verse 2 and verse 5 seem to contradict. However, it's the word burden. In verse 2 where it says, bear one another's burdens, let me give you the visual. That's a piano weight burden. When I moved into our house and we moved in, I did not carry every piece of furniture, thank God. There were great men that came and helped, and other gals that came and helped and carried things in. And some of the big furniture, I didn't even actually move in. Other people helped me carry those. I could have never carried them in on my own. And had I tried, I would have ruined the furniture and I would have hurt myself. There are burdens that we carry that are piano weight burdens. And we need our brothers and sisters to help us. And many times maybe they're not helping us because we don't actually let them know we have one. We don't bring it into the light, as it were, which is obviously one of the attitudes that we're trying to espouse here at Christ Community Church. Verse 2 is the back-breaking piano weight burden. Verse 5 where it says, let every man bear his own burden. I like to think of those as the backpack burdens. And there are some burdens that we'll have to carry our whole life. Paul prayed, I'd like this thorn in my flesh taken away. And the Lord said no. He asked again, no. Finally, he says, my grace is sufficient for you. My strength is made perfect in weakness. Strength in weakness. I've said it many times. God doesn't need our strength. He needs our weakness. He needs our brokenness. Because it's in that brokenness that he receives glory. Bearing one another's burdens and fulfilling the law of Jesus Christ. There is a New Testament law, and it is to carry the load for each other, to shoulder and walk together as fellow travelers. I bless you with grace and peace, and I pray that this covers you in Jesus' name.